Do you really think you have the right to stop me from filming? The whole of Rwanda is about to find out you're the most difficult neighbor in this community. Keza Mukamana raised her phone to start a live stream just as Claudet Uwimana gently lifted her hand and said, "Please don't film me." Within only a few hours, that 19-second clip had attracted more than 860,000 views, turning a quiet, kind-hearted woman into the internet's latest target of ridicule. What no one knew was that Keza had cut out nearly an entire minute of footage, the 1 minute that explained everything. In my opinion, the truth is rarely buried by lies. More often, it is hidden by the parts people deliberately choose not to show. Before we begin, let me know which city you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more meaningful stories. After the video spread across social media, many people believed Claudet Uwimana was a difficult woman, always frowning, and always ready to make trouble for her neighbors. They shared the clip, left mocking comments, and even turned her face into jokes and memes. The saddest part was that most of those people had never met Claudet in real life. They had never walked down the small street where she had lived for 12 years. They only knew her through 19 carefully edited seconds. In my opinion, sometimes the most dangerous thing on social media is not an obvious lie, but a small piece of truth arranged in a way that makes people misunderstand. Nyamirambo woke up like it always did. The sound of brooms sweeping courtyards echoed in front of red brick houses, the smell of freshly made chapati mixed with hot tea from roadside stalls. Fruit sellers arranged baskets of avocados, bananas, and mangoes in front of their small shops, while bus drivers began calling for passengers near the junction. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Claudet. They did not call her simply a librarian. They lovingly called her the keeper of books. Any book with torn pages, a broken spine, or missing covers could be brought to the community library, and a few days later it would return almost whole again. She never charged for the work. People usually left behind a packet of tea, some fruit, or simply a sincere thank you. The library sat quietly beneath old jacaranda trees. It was not luxurious inside. The wooden shelves had been repaired again and again by volunteers. The reading corner had only a few cane chairs, several hand-woven mats, and small green plants placed near the windows to catch the sunlight. Claudet loved that place more than almost anything else. She believed that a well-kept book could change a person's life, just as one kind word could sometimes save a wounded heart. Every day, she quietly checked each shelf, glued the edges of damaged books, wiped dust from every cover, and carefully wrote down the titles that needed repair. No one told her to do that much. No one paid her extra for being so careful. But Claudet always told the volunteers that books were like people. When they were treated with respect, they could continue to walk with many generations. There was only one thing people did not understand. Whenever Claudet saw a phone pointed at her, she immediately turned her face away or gently raised her hand to cover the lens. She did not shout. She did not grab anyone's phone. She had never argued with anyone about it. She only said one sentence politely, "Please don't film me." At first, the neighbors thought she was simply shy in front of cameras. Later, when Keza moved into the neighborhood and began creating content every day, that quiet habit became something the young woman used to entertain hundreds of thousands of followers. Keza Mukamana was the complete opposite of Claudet. She loved everything to appear on camera. Every meal, every market trip, every conversation with a neighbor could become content. She often said ordinary life became interesting when it was told the right way. Keza's videos were always full of laughter, lively effects, and captions that made people stop scrolling. Because of that, her audience grew quickly, and brands began reaching out for paid partnerships. At first, Keza only filmed daily life in the neighborhood, but then she noticed something. Each time Claudet appeared and avoided the camera, the comments increased. Viewers became curious about the woman who always ran from the camera. That curiosity made Keza believe she had found the perfect character to keep her page alive. She did not realize that behind Claudet's silence was a story so painful that if people knew it, even the coldest heart might not dare turn it into entertainment. The next morning, Keza Mukamana's video had appeared in most local community groups and was being shared across several other platforms. With only a few mocking captions, she turned Claudet Uwimana into the image of a stubborn woman who was always angry at anyone holding a phone. The first comments were still fairly mild, but after only a few hours, everything began to spiral out of control. People called Claudet the scary neighbor, the woman who hates young people, and some even claimed she had anger issues without knowing anything about her real life. In my opinion, when thousands of people repeat something they have not verified, that statement quickly begins to look like the truth. Keza barely had to do anything except read the comments and laugh at the screen. She replied to viewers with funny remarks, added a few emojis, and kept insisting that she was only recording real daily life. In her eyes, this was simply successful content. She did not think she was hurting anyone because Claudet had never defended herself online. That silence made Keza believe even more that she had done nothing wrong. Meanwhile, Claudet's life began to change in ways she had never wanted. On her way from home to the library, a few people recognized the familiar face from the video. They stared at her longer than usual, whispered to one another, and then laughed. A group of young people passing by even secretly raised their phones to take pictures before quickly walking away. Claudet continued walking as if nothing had happened, but her hands tired. Those looks were not because they truly knew her, but because they believed they already knew everything about her. The community library had always been filled with quiet conversations. Elderly people came to read newspapers, small trades borrowed books about business, and many women in the neighborhood stopped by to learn more about managing family finances. But in recent days, the atmosphere had begun to change. Some people entered only to stare at Claudet for a while before taking out their phones to film her secretly. One young woman even laughed with her friend and said she had finally met the famous woman from the internet. Claudet simply turned away and continued repairing the spine of an old book, as if she had heard nothing. What hurt her most was not the mockery. What troubled her deeply was that fewer people were coming to borrow books. Some residents no longer visited the library as often as before. Some were afraid of being filmed if they accidentally appeared in one of Keza's videos. Others simply did not want to enter a place that had become subject of gossip online. Every empty chair in the reading room made Claudet feel as if she had lost another small piece of the purpose that had kept her going for years. That afternoon, Espirans came to the library carrying a bag of freshly baked bread. As soon as she placed the bag on the table, she looked around the room and sighed softly. The place that was once full of people now felt strangely quiet. Claudet was still carefully sorting books like she always did, but her gentle smile had almost disappeared. Espirans did not ask about the video right away. She simply sat across from Claudet and helped her repair pages that had come loose. After a long silence, she gently said that the whole neighborhood knew about the situation, and many people truly believed what they had seen online. Claudet stayed quiet for a long moment before answering that she did not blame the people commenting. They only saw what someone else chose to show them. If she herself watched a short video about a stranger, maybe she might also make the same mistake. What hurt her was that Keza had never asked why she always refused to be filmed. Just one sincere question before posting the video could have changed everything. Espirans looked at her friend and gently held the hand that had grown rough from years of repairing books. She knew Claudet was still trying to protect the peace of the neighborhood, even though she was the one suffering the most. But Espirans also began to feel that if the truth continued to be buried beneath edited clips, it would not only damage Claudet's dignity, it could slowly destroy the value of the entire community library as well. At exactly 6:28 p.m., Claudet Uwimana carefully pulled shut the wooden doors of the community library earlier than usual. It was the first time in years that she had closed before the normal hour, not because she was tired, but because only a handful of visitors had come throughout the entire day. The reading chairs still sat neatly beneath the windows, and the potted plants had been watered just as they always were. Yet the room that had once been filled with quiet conversations now felt so empty that the sound of turning pages echoed through the silence. In my opinion, some wounds do not make people cry immediately. Instead, they quietly take away the things those people love the most. Claudet sat down at her familiar wooden desk and opened the notebook where she carefully recorded every borrowed book. The pages looked emptier than ever. She did not care about the names strangers called her online, but every blank space in that notebook made her heart feel a little heavier. The library had never been a way to earn money. It was a promise she had made to herself after her life had changed many years ago. She had always believed that as long as even one person walked through those doors looking for a book, her work still had meaning. Over the following days, many people walked past the library but stopped only to stare through the entrance. Some quietly raised their phones as if they wanted to record her, but when they met Claudet's calm eyes, they awkwardly lowered their devices and walked away. Others were less hesitant. They laughed outside the gate, repeated the joke spreading online, and looked toward her as though hoping for a dramatic reaction they could upload to the internet. Claudet never responded. She simply continued dusting the shelves and placing every book back where it belonged. What surprised her most was that even some longtime neighbors began keeping their distance. It was not because they disliked her, they were simply afraid of accidentally appearing in another viral video and becoming the next targets themselves. Social media had planted an invisible fear throughout the neighborhood. Conversations outside the library became shorter. Friendly greetings became less frequent. The streets were still full of people, yet Claudet had never felt so alone. That afternoon, Espirans arrived carrying a basket of ripe mangoes. As she entered, she looked around the quiet room and forced herself to smile, hoping to hide her concern. She told a few light-hearted stories from her cafe, asked about the damaged books, and offered to help organize the storage room. Claudet smiled politely in return, but the warmth behind that smile was gone. Her closest friend knew immediately that Claudet was pretending everything was normal, so no one else would worry. After a long silence, Espirans gently asked why Claudet still refused to tell her side of the story. A short video explaining the truth could help many people understand. Claudet quietly closed the notebook and shook her head. She said the truth should never begin with an argument on the internet. If she also picked up a phone to fight back, there would simply be more edited clips, more endless debates, and eventually no one would remember what truly mattered. People would only remember who won the argument, not who was right. Esperance sighed softly. That was exactly who Claudet had always been. She was the kind of woman who chose peace before victory. But this time, her silence was allowing a good person to appear guilty in the eyes of hundreds of thousands of strangers. While Claudet quietly continued caring for the library, Keza Mukamana was enjoying the greatest success of her online career. Brands were reaching out with partnership offers. Influencers were sharing her videos, calling them authentic neighborhood content. Every time she checked her account, the number of followers continued to climb. Keza believed she was simply recording everyday life. She never realized that behind every new view stood a real woman who now had to live under the suspicious eyes of an entire community. Even John Bosco, the neighborhood leader who always tried to remain neutral, began noticing that something had changed. Small disagreements that once could have been solved with a simple conversation were now quickly uploaded online for attention. He looked toward the community library, where Claudet was still carefully repairing old books, and quietly wondered how many people had already judged her without ever stepping inside that building even once. As the last rays of sunlight filtered through the purple jacaranda trees outside the community library, Espirans quietly placed 2 cups of ginger tea on the familiar wooden table. There were no readers left inside. The bookshelves were as neat as ever. Yet the silence that filled the room carried a loneliness that had never existed before. Claudet Uwimana continued tearing the spine of an old novel with careful hands, as though the familiar work could help her forget the cruel comments spreading across social media. In my opinion, some people remain silent not because they are weak, but because they fear that speaking about their pain will only turn it into entertainment for others. Espérance watched her friend for a long time before gently sliding one of the cups toward her. She no longer mentioned the viral videos or the number of views. What truly concerned her was the change in Claudette's eyes. The woman who had always remained calm through every hardship still looked composed on the outside, but the quiet light that once filled her eyes had faded. It was not the look of someone who was angry. It was the expression of someone exhausted from constantly having to prove she was not the person the world imagined her to be. Espirans softly said that many people in the neighborhood still believed in Claudette. They simply did not know what to do, while thousands of comments and edited videos continued spreading online. If Claudette shared the truth, at least people would have the chance to hear the story from the person living it. She also reminded her that silence could be a beautiful quality, but sometimes silence unintentionally allows someone else to control the story. Claudette laid her small brush on the table and smiled gently. It was a smile filled more with gratitude than happiness. She knew Espirans only wanted to protect her, but after a long pause, Claudette slowly shook her head. She explained that she did not want to tell her old story, simply to gain sympathy. Some memories had taken years to quietly place into a peaceful corner of her heart. If she pulled them out now just to prove her innocence, it would feel as though she were tearing open wounds that had only recently begun to heal. Espirans remained silent. In all the years they had been friends, she had never heard Claudette speak so openly about the past. Whenever anyone casually asked why she always avoided cameras, Claudette would simply smile and change the subject. Espirans had never forced her to explain, but today she realized there had to be something deeply painful hidden behind that quiet refusal. Claudette gently smoothed the cover of the book in front of her before looking toward the small garden outside the library. She admitted that even now, whenever she heard someone start a live stream in a public place, her heart still raced unexpectedly. It was not because she hated technology. It was not because she disliked young people. It was because she had once witnessed how a single phone camera could change the course of an entire family's life forever. She did not reveal exactly what had happened. She stopped there, as though the rest of the story was still too heavy to put into words. Espirans felt a lump rise in her throat. Suddenly, she understood that Keza Mukamana had never known any of this. The young content creator had only seen a woman avoiding the camera and had filled in the rest of the story with her own assumptions. Even worse, hundreds of thousands of viewers had done exactly the same thing. No one asked questions. No one checked the facts. They simply believed the version that seemed the most entertaining. Meanwhile, Keza continued planning new videos. She watched her growing follower count as if it were proof of her creativity. Some of her friends congratulated her for creating a successful series that audiences could not stop watching. They brainstormed more dramatic titles, funnier angles, and stronger reactions from Claudette. None of them realized that the woman they kept filming had never started a single argument. All she had ever done was quietly ask for a little distance from a camera. Later that evening, Jean Bosco stopped by the library to return a history book he had borrowed. He looked around the unusually quiet room and sighed softly. He never mentioned social media directly. Instead, he simply said that every community experiences misunderstandings, but when people listen only to the loudest voice, the kindest person is often the one who suffers the most. Claudette smiled politely in return. Was happy. She still believed kindness should never be practiced for recognition. Yet for the first time in many years, she quietly wondered whether her silence had unintentionally allowed something harmful to grow stronger. Heavy rain suddenly poured over the city of Kigali. Street vendors rushed to pull plastic covers over their stalls. Pedestrians ran for shelter. And outside the community library, strong winds drove sheets of rain across the stone walkway. Claudette Uwimana had just finished locking the eastern window when she noticed an elderly man struggling with a handcart loaded with old books. One of the wheels had become stuck in a drainage grate, causing the entire stack of books to tilt dangerously. Within seconds, books began falling onto the rain-soaked pavement. Without a moment of hesitation, Claudette placed her keys on the table, grabbed the library's large umbrella, and hurried outside. She never asked the man who he was. She did not care that her clothes were quickly becoming soaked. The very first thing she did was hold the umbrella over the books instead of herself, before kneeling down to pick them up one by one. The books that had already absorbed rainwater were carefully separated from the dry ones, and she gently covered them with a clean cloth she had brought from inside the library. The elderly man apologized repeatedly for causing trouble. He explained that he collected used books from families across the city and resold them to schools in rural communities. If these books were ruined, he would lose nearly all the savings he had spent months building. Claudet simply smiled and told him not to worry. She helped pull the cart beneath the library's front shelter and carefully inspected every single book beside him. Some only needed to be dried, others required new covers. Several needed their bindings repaired. For Claudet, these were ordinary tasks he had performed for many years. Across the street, Espirans stood inside her cafe watching everything through the front window. She did not rush outside because she knew Claudet always preferred helping others quietly on her own. What caught Espirans' attention instead was the security camera mounted beneath the cafe's roof. From that angle, it recorded the entire scene. Claudet shielding the elderly man and his books with her umbrella, kneeling on the wet ground, carefully lifting every book, and gently drying each cover before placing them back into the cart. There was no dialogue, no background music, only the sound of rain and the image of a woman doing something kind as naturally as breathing. Meanwhile, Keza Mukamana had just finished filming a promotional campaign for a sponsor. As she scrolled through her phone, she noticed that the comments beneath her videos about Claudet were still increasing rapidly. Several followers even encouraged her to continue the Grumpy Neighbor series because it had become the most popular content on her channel. Keza smiled with satisfaction. She immediately began planning another episode, convinced that all she needed was one more reaction from Claudet to keep her audience engaged. Back at the library, Claudet had no idea that the security camera had captured everything. After helping the elderly man organize the books, she brought out an old paper dryer to remove moisture from those that had become damp. The man was so grateful that he tried several times to offer her money, but Claudet politely refused every attempt. She asked for only one thing in return. If those books eventually reached people who needed them, she hoped they would care for them well so they could continue serving others for many years. The elderly man nodded with tears in his eyes. Before leaving, he stood quietly for a long moment, looking back at the library before bowing his head in gratitude one final time. Claudet simply stood beneath the shelter, watching the old car disappear down the street. To her, it had been nothing more than another ordinary afternoon. She never imagined that such a small act of kindness had been quietly preserved inside the memory of a security camera, waiting for the moment it would completely change the lives of two different people. Later that evening, Espirans happened to review the security footage while checking whether the heavy rain had damaged the cafe's sign outside. As the recording played, she froze. She was not surprised that Claudet had helped a stranger. What moved her deeply was realizing that throughout the entire recording, Claudet had never once looked toward the camera. She had no idea anyone was watching. There were no dramatic gestures, no performance, no attempt to appear compassionate. Everything felt completely natural, making it obvious that her kindness came from habit, not from any desire to impress others. Espirans sat quietly in front of the screen for a long time. She remembered Claudet once saying that truly kind people never needed to turn either their pain or their good deeds into content. But for the first time, Espirans began wondering whether that very silence was allowing a false story to spread even farther. She did not want to attack Keza or start another online argument. She only wanted people to finally see the real Claudet, the woman whose true character had never fit inside those short viral clips. At exactly 8:15 p.m., Espirans sat alone in her cafe after the last customer had left. She replayed the security camera footage one more time. Every time she watched it, she noticed another small detail she had missed before. Claudet Uwimana never once looked toward the camera. She had absolutely no idea anyone was recording her. She simply stood in the rain, shielding a stranger with her umbrella, carefully lifting each soaked book from the ground, gently wiping every cover dry, and placing the books neatly back onto the old cart. In my opinion, the most beautiful thing about kindness is not that many people see it. It is that it still exists even when no one is watching. Espirans slowly closed her laptop and sat in silence for a long while. She remembered Claudet's words about never wanting to turn her own life into another online argument. Out of respect for her friend, Espirans had never considered making anything public. But over the past several days, she had watched the library grow emptier, the rumors spread wider, and the neighborhood gradually begin to look at Claudet with different eyes. She realized that if everyone remained silent, the misunderstanding would continue to grow. After hours of thinking, Espirans made a decision. She would not create a video attacking Keza Mukamana. She would not edit together Keza's old live streams to prove who was right or wrong. Instead, she uploaded the complete security camera footage exactly as it was, without background music, without dramatic effects, and without criticizing anyone. The caption contained only one simple sentence. This is the woman many people judged after watching only a few seconds online. The video began spreading in a completely different way from the previous ones. There was no laughter, no mockery. Viewers quietly watched Claudet kneel in the rain, picking up every soaked book, carefully drying each page with a small cloth while reassuring the elderly man who kept apologizing. What touched people most was how natural everything looked. She never seemed like someone trying to prove she was kind. The first comments appeared cautiously. Some people admitted they had never imagined Claudet was completely different from the image they had seen online. Others began asking why Keza's videos had always started, only when Claudet raised her hand to block the camera. As more people watched, more questions followed. They returned to Keza's older videos and realized that every clip ended almost immediately after Claudet reacted. Happy. None of them showed what happened before the camera was pointed at her, and none showed what happened afterward. For the first time, the conversation online was no longer about Claudet's personality. Instead, people began discussing the responsibility of content creators. Many admitted they had judged someone too quickly based on only a few seconds of edited footage. Others quietly deleted the insulting comments they had posted beneath Keza's earlier videos. No one forced them to do it. They simply felt shamed after realizing they had helped hurt an innocent woman. Meanwhile, Keza had no idea what was happening. She opened her phone with the same excitement she felt every morning, but instead of the familiar compliments, she found hundreds of questions waiting for her. People were no longer asking when the next neighbor video would be uploaded. They wanted to know why she had never shown the entire story. Some asked politely, others expressed disappointment. Many wrote that they had always admired the honesty of her content, but now they were no longer sure what on her channel could truly be trusted. Keza continued reading, hoping the criticism would eventually fade. Instead, a strange feeling settled over her. It was not anger from her audience. It was something much heavier, the quiet loss of trust. She suddenly realized that views could rise overnight because of controversy, but trust was built through hundreds of honest choices made every single day. And once people believed they had been misled, everything she had worked so hard to build began to crumble. Back at the community library, Claudet remained completely unaware of what was unfolding online. She continued repairing worn-out books, organizing the shelves, and welcoming every visitor with the same gentle smile she had always worn. She had no idea that in just one evening, thousands of people had begun seeing her differently, not with curiosity or ridicule anymore, but with genuine respect for a woman who had never demanded justice for herself, yet was quietly protected by the truth. Keza Mukamana sat at her familiar desk with a steaming cup of coffee, preparing to record another video just as she did every day. She had already chosen her outfit, adjusted the lighting, placed her phone on its tripod, and opened the app to read the latest comments before going live. But for the first time in years as a content creator, she did not see the familiar words of praise. Instead, hundreds of comments were asking the very same question. No one wanted to know when the next video about her neighbor would be uploaded. They simply wanted to know why she had never told the whole story. In my opinion, the greatest fear of any content creator is not criticism. It is the moment their audience no longer trusts what they say. Keza tried to remain calm. She told herself this was only a temporary reaction from the online community. If she uploaded fresh content, people would eventually move on, just as they had before. But the more comments she read, the more her confidence disappeared. Many longtime followers wrote that they had originally loved her channel because it felt honest and relatable. That was exactly why they now felt deeply disappointed after discovering that the videos about Claudet Uwimana had shown only fragments of what had actually happened. What hurt Keza most was that very few people attacked her with cruel words. Most quietly said they were choosing to unfollow her. Some explained that they did not hate her, but they could no longer support content that caused unnecessary harm to another person. Those calm, respectful messages felt heavier than any insult ever could. Keza realized that disappointment often speaks more quietly than anger, but it is much harder to repair. Over the following days, advertising partners began sending brief emails. They politely informed her that upcoming campaigns would be placed on hold while they reassessed her public image. No one accused her directly. No one publicly condemned her. Yet that professional distance was enough for Keza to understand that her credibility was beginning to collapse. She had always believed that follower counts were a creator's greatest asset. Now she realized that trust was far more valuable. Keza spent hours sitting in front of her computer, reopening every video she had ever made about Claudet. For the first time, she watched them through the eyes of an outsider. As one clip followed another, she noticed something she had never truly seen before. Every video began at the exact moment Claudet raised her hand to block the camera or turned her face away. Everything that happened before Keza walked directly toward her with the phone, and everything that happened after Claudet quietly left had been removed. In the past, Keza had simply considered that good editing to keep videos short and engaging. Now, even she could see that the picture she had created was missing the most important pieces. Meanwhile, life at the community library slowly returned to normal. More visitors came through the doors each day, not because Claudet had become famous, but because people wanted to meet the woman behind the headlines. They entered with respect rather than curiosity. Some donated books that were still in excellent condition. Others volunteered to help maintain the library. A few simply wanted to apologize for believing things they had never taken the time to verify. Claudet remained exactly as she had always been. She never mentioned Keza. She never talked about the comments that had hurt her. When visitors asked how she felt now that public opinion had changed, she simply smiled and said that what mattered most was not what people thought of her, but that the library was once again filled with readers. That simple answer moved many people far more deeply than any dramatic speech ever could. Jean Bosco, the neighborhood leader, quietly observed the changes and realized something important. A community does not become stronger because someone wins an argument. It becomes stronger when people recognize their mistakes and choose to correct them. Inspired by everything that had happened, he began organizing community discussions between local residents and digital content creators to talk about privacy, responsibility, and respect in the age of social media. He believed Claudet and Keza's story should not end with division. Instead, it should become a lesson that would prevent others from experiencing the same pain. Inside her apartment, Keza sat silently staring at the dark screen of her phone. For the first time in years, she was no longer thinking about views, algorithms, or engagement. Only one simple question echoed repeatedly in her mind. If she had taken just a few minutes to ask Claudet why she always avoided cameras from the very beginning, would any of this have happened at all? The wooden door of the community library slowly opened. Claudet Uwimana was sitting at her usual table, carefully replacing the spine of an old dictionary. At first, she did not look up, assuming it was simply another visitor coming to borrow a book. Only when she heard a pair of slow footsteps stop in front of her did she gently put down her small brush and raise her eyes. Standing before her was Keza Mukamana. But unlike every previous encounter, there was no phone in her hand, no tripod, and no wireless microphone clipped to her shirt. Instead, both of her hands held a large cardboard box filled with brand new books. The library was unusually quiet. Keza lowered her head for a long moment before finally speaking. Her voice was much softer than it had ever been online. She explained that she had not come to record a video, ask for a photograph, or create another moment for social media. She had come for only one reason: to say something she should have said a long time ago. Claudet remained silent. She was not cold, but neither did she rush to smile. After everything that had happened, silence no longer meant distance. It meant respect for the words that were about to be spoken. Keza took a deep breath before quietly admitting that she had barely slept over the past several nights. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the videos she had edited, the captions she had written, and the thousands of mocking comments that had followed because of her content. Happy. She had always believed she was simply documenting everyday life. Now she finally understood that there was a profound difference between recording reality and shaping the way millions of people judged another human being. She carefully placed the box on the floor and opened it. Inside were brand new novels, history books, science books, and children's literature, all purchased with the final payment she had received before her sponsorships were suspended. Keza quietly explained that she was not bringing the books to earn forgiveness. She only wanted them to be placed somewhere they could truly make a difference. Claudet looked at the books for a long time. She recognized several titles the library had hoped to purchase for years, but had never been able to afford. Gently closing the box, she invited Keza to sit across from her. For several minutes, neither woman spoke. Outside, a gentle breeze carried dry leaves across the walkway. The only sound inside the library was the quiet turning of pages by a reader in the corner. Finally, Claudet broke the silence. She did not ask why Keza had done what she did. She did not speak about the pain she had endured. Instead, she asked only one simple question. After everything that has happened, what have you learned? The question caught Keza completely off guard. She struggled to answer. Slowly, she admitted that she had once believed the job of a content creator was simply to create strong emotions. But now she understood that strong emotions were not the same as meaningful value. A video could make millions of people laugh for a few moments, yet it could also leave one innocent person carrying deep emotional wounds for years. She confessed that losing followers and sponsorships was not what hurt her most. What haunted her was realizing that for so long she had turned the life of a genuinely kind woman into a tool for building her own career. Claudet nodded quietly. Looking toward the shelves that had been part of her life for so many years, she calmly replied that everyone makes mistakes. What truly defines a person is not whether they have failed, but whether they choose to defend their mistakes or find the courage to change afterward. Keza gently wiped away her tears. She explained that she had already deleted every video about Claudet and posted a public apology, but she knew that still was not enough. A person's dignity could never be fully restored by a few written words. From that day forward, she promised she would never again film someone without their permission. If she chose to tell someone's story, she would tell the whole story, not just the parts that attracted the most attention. For the first time since Keza had entered the library, Claudet smiled. It was not the smile of someone who had won, nor was it the smile of someone who had finally been proven right. It was the smile of a woman witnessing another human being truly begin to grow. Before leaving, Keza turned back for one last look at the library. At that moment, she realized something she had never understood before. This peaceful place had never needed viral videos to become meaningful. It was the quiet people who cared for it every day who deserved to be seen. 1 year later, the gates of the community library in Nyamirambo opened earlier than usual. The morning sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a warm glow over the newly restored wooden sign at the entrance. Outside, volunteers unloaded boxes of donated books from a small delivery truck. There were novels, Rwandan history books, business guides for women, educational materials, and countless well-preserved books that families across the country had chosen to donate. No one talked about the viral videos anymore. Instead, people simply said that this library deserved to continue serving the community for many years to come. In my opinion, the most beautiful victory is not when someone's name is finally cleared, but when their suffering becomes the beginning of something that helps many others. Claudet Uwimana had not changed her routine. She was still the first person to arrive every morning. She opened every window to welcome the fresh air, gently dusted each bookshelf, and placed a small bouquet of wildflowers on the reading table in the center of the room. Her life looked much the same as before. She still wore simple dresses, still repaired worn-out books with her own hands, and still remembered the names of nearly everyone who visited the library. The only real difference was that the reading room was once again filled with conversations, turning pages, and quiet laughter. Espirans stood at the entrance, smiling as she watched her lifelong friend. Her cafe still stood across the street, exactly where it had always been. But now many customers crossed over to the library after finishing their coffee, either to read for a while or to donate books they no longer needed. Espérance had once believed she was simply helping Claudet through a difficult season. Instead, she realized that the entire neighborhood had changed because of what had happened. People now took the time to talk before making judgments. They became more careful before sharing videos online, and they began asking questions before believing everything they saw on social media. John Bosco and the Neighborhood Council later organized community workshops about digital responsibility, privacy, and respectful online behavior. Their goal was never to criticize anyone. Instead, they wanted people to understand that while a camera could record reality, it could also remove the context that gives reality its meaning. These discussions attracted many young people. They listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and openly admitted the times they themselves had shared information without checking whether it was true. Gradually, Claudet's experience stopped being remembered as a scandal. It became a lesson people referred to whenever conversations about responsible content creation arose. As for Keza Mukamana, she continued doing the work she loved. But now she no longer raised her phones towards strangers without thinking. Whenever she wanted to tell someone's story, she first sat down, listened carefully, and always asked for permission before pressing the record button. Her new videos no longer reached millions of views overnight as they once had. Their growth was slower, yet the comment sections were filled with thoughtful conversations instead of arguments. Many viewers wrote that they starred not because of drama, but because the stories reminded them that goodness still existed in ordinary people. One day, Kiza returned to the library, not as a content creator but as a volunteer. She spent hours beside Claudet repairing old books and learning how to restore damaged pages. They rarely spoke about the past. Instead, they discussed paper preservation, organizing the shelves, and ideas for expanding the library's programs. Within those quiet moments, Keza finally understood something important. Forgiveness does not erase what happened. Forgiveness simply means both people refuse to let the past decide who they will become. By the end of the year, the community library opened a new reading room for adults who had never learned how to read or write. Claudet never stood on stage during the opening ceremony. Instead, she quietly sat beside an elderly woman, patiently helping her sound out the first words of a simple book. Watching from across the room, Espérance remembered the painful days when the library had stood nearly empty because of edited online videos. The past could never be erased, but everyone still had the power to choose what they would build from it. If someone asked Claudet what made her happiest after everything she had endured, she would probably never mention the public apologies or the library's unexpected popularity. She would simply smile and point toward the crowded bookshelves filled with readers once again. From beginning to end, what she had wanted to protect was never her own reputation. She had only wanted to protect a place where people could learn to listen, understand one another, and become kinder human beings. 1 year after everything had settled down, the community library in Nyamirambo had become far more than just a place to borrow books. It had grown into a space where strangers became neighbors and neighbors became friends. Every weekend, volunteers organized free reading sessions, literacy classes for adults, and small workshops where women shared business ideas and practical skills with one another. Claudet Uwimana still welcomed everyone with the same gentle smile she had always carried, but there was one quiet difference. She no longer avoided every camera. Whenever journalists or ethical content creators asked to document the library, they always requested her cooperation first. Claudet agreed only when she knew the purpose was to inspire people rather than satisfy curiosity. As for Keza Mukamana, she became one of the library's most dedicated volunteers. Instead of chasing controversy, she used her platform to tell honest stories about ordinary Rwandans making extraordinary differences in their communities. Her audience no longer grew overnight, but every comment reflected respect instead of excitement over drama. The two women who had once stood on opposite sides of a painful misunderstanding could now often be found sitting beside the same bookshelf, proving that genuine sincerity has the power to heal wounds that fame never could. Modern life exposes us to thousands of videos every single day, yet not every video tells the whole truth. Sometimes only a few seconds of carefully edited footage are enough to make millions of people admire someone or condemn them. That is why our greatest responsibility is not to consume content more quickly, but to think more carefully before believing everything we see. Every content creator has the freedom to tell stories, but that freedom should always be balanced with the responsibility to protect another person's dignity, privacy, and humanity. Views may bring temporary success, but trust is earned only through honesty, fairness, and respect. Claudet and Keza's journey reminds us that genuine kindness is often quiet. Many people spend their lives helping others without ever asking for recognition or a camera to witness their actions. If each of us paused for just a few extra moments to hear the complete story before judging someone, asked permission before recording another person's life, and tried to understand the circumstances before forming an opinion, social media could become far more than a place for entertainment. It could become a place where compassion, wisdom, and human dignity are shared just as quickly as any viral video. In my opinion, the truth will always be worth more than views. If you believe kindness deserves to be shared, comment truth, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs its message today.